Now we have the flexbox.html. We have the flexbox.html and then the flexbox.css. In the flexbox.html, we have this document, the section with the class name of container, and then divs, that is 8 divs elements here, each with their class name, box 1, box 2, and to box 8, right? And then we have linked the CSS style sheet, that's flexbox.css, and then right in flexbox.css, right? First, we reset all the browser default styles by setting the margin padding to 0, the box size into border box. And then we set the font size of the HTML element to 62.5%, which is also equivalent to 10 pixels, which will make our calculation more easier by the time we start using the rem property or the rem unit rather. And then the container, which is the section element here, which is the parent element of all these 8 divs, right? Has a background of this dark and then color white, font size of 1.8 rem, which is also equivalent to 18 pixels because that's going to be 1.8 times 10, and then height of 80. Okay, and then we actually gave different background colors for the 8 box, so box 1 down to box 8. Great. Flexbox, a set of related CSS properties for building one-dimensional layouts. So it's a perfect one-dimensional layout. Now, if you look at the right now, these 8 boxes or these 8 elements are vertically, right? So from top to bottom, So there is a way you can actually make them stand or bin layout side by side using Flexbox property, and that's what we look at right now. So Flexbox is a set of related CSS properties in one-dimensional layout. The main idea behind Flexbox is that empty space inside a container element can be automatically divided by its child element. Empty space inside a container element. So right now, the empty space that we have here is this black or this shade of gray space that we have here. So which means we can share this empty space between the child elements, and the child elements are all these 8 boxes we have here. Flexbox makes it easy to automatically align items to one another, both horizontally and vertically. So Flexbox solves common problems such as vertical centering and creating equal height columns. Flexbox is perfect for placing floats. So I didn't show us floats because I feel there is no point. Then allowing us to write fewer and cleaner CSS code. All right. Now look at it here. We're going to look at some terminology of Flexbox. Look at this light orange box here, which is acting as the container for these 6, or is it 5? Yeah. 3, 4, 5 boxes, right? Inside this large box here, right? Now we consider this large box, Flexbox, as the flex container, and then all the items that we have inside the box. Even if you have one box, that box is considered as the item inside the container. So these are the flex items, and then this particular box container. Please, this is very, very important. We have 2 axes. We have 2 axes in Flexbox. The one that goes horizontally by default is in axis, and then the vertical one is the cross axis. It can actually change based on the value of flex. We're going to see some of the properties shortly, but note that by default, if you set the display property of an element to flex, right, the horizontal axis is the main axis, and then the vertical axis or the vertical line is the cross axis. All right. So to make an element a flex container, all you need to do is to set the display property to flex. So you can see this display is very, very powerful actually. We can use it to do a lot of things. So set display property to flex, and then automatically the flex container and all the direct child elements, becomes the flex items. Please, that's very, very important. And then now let's look at some of the properties in Flexbox. I'll take note of this diagram again. Illustration. So the moment you actually set display property of an element to flex, right, all the direct child elements will be side by side horizontally. At this point, they are still stacking on each other vertically, right? But the moment I change the container, okay, this section with the class name of container to flex, all these 8 boxes will be aligned side by side vertically, horizontally, because that is the idea behind Flexbox. Okay, let's try it. So back to our code. Now let's look at the section again. Now this section here is the container or the parent for these eight divs elements, 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, right? And then with different class name. All right. Now back to the CSS, and here is the element here, the section with the class name container. So start Flexbox. I'm just going to create a comment here. Yeah, Flexbox. So to set the display property flex, that's all. Flex, and back to the browser. Now you refresh. Look at it here. All the elements now, they are now aligned. All the child elements, all items, they are now aligned side by side horizontally. So they are no longer stacking on each other vertically. So now they are aligned side by side horizontally. Box 1, box 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then box 8. And then you also notice that all the they stretch to occupy the height of the container. So they stretch to occupy the height of the container. I'm going to explain that too as well. But then let's proceed. So now we have flex container and flex items. Remember, if you set the display property of an element to flex, it becomes flex container, and all the direct child elements becomes the flex items, right? So which means there are properties on a flex container, which are these properties right here. This 1 to 6 properties. All these properties that you're seeing here are the ones that you can set on only flex items. So which means you can't set align self on a flex container, it's not going to work. Similarly, you can't set gap on a flex item, it's not going to work, because gap is going to work on a flex container. And one thing you also notice that a flex item can actually become a flex container. Don't worry, get there. Let's understand this first. Now we have gap. Now gap creates space between items without using margin. So gap is more like margin. Look at this 5 box here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now the gap, that is the space between the first box and the second box. Similarly, the space between the second box and the third box, or you can call it margin in box model. But in Flexbox, we use gap. Now to my code and the output. Now look at these 8 boxes, close to each other, no space between them. If you want to create gap, or you want to specify your desired gap between these items, these flex items, right? You can use gap. And remember, gap is meant to be on a flex container. You can't use it on box 1 because box 1 is a flex item. So gap flex container, and say okay, gap of, let's say 2.4 rem. 2.4 rem means 4 pixels. That's 2.4 times 10. This back to the browser, refresh. So you see, I've been able to create gaps between the flex items. Okay, the flex items. So if I increase it to, let's say, which means 48 pixels, save. So you see, so it's increased more because actually what increased the value of the gap. So that's gap basically. Let's look at that one. We have justify content. Content has about 5 or 6 values. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 values. Flex start, the flex end, space between, space around, and then space here. So we use justify content to align items along main axis horizontally by default. Remember, I said you should take note of the main axis and the cross axis. Default, the main axis is the X or the, and then the cross axis by default is the vertical. So justify content always goes along the main axis. And then we have the opposite of it, the other side of it, which is the align items, right? Which align items along the cross axis. So justify content the main axis, while align items follows the cross axis. So first, let's look at some of the content. We have the flex stats. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to comment out this gap so that we can how justify content work basically. So I will head back to the first and ensure that everything is back to the default. Here is the default for a flex box. So back to my code. Justify content. I'm just going to create a comment here. Justify content. Justify content. Justify content. The first value here is flex start. Actually, this is what, and it's not going to change anything on the browser right now, and I'm going to explain. So starts, flex starts to the browser, refresh. Nothing changes actually, and that's because the items are already at the start of the flex container. Remember, justify content goes along the main axis of the flex box. All right, and the axis is the horizontal axis. So flex start means the beginning, see the starting point of the flex container. Okay, so if you say flex end, it means that it will push to the extreme end of the flex container. And if you say center, it will keep all the flex items at the center, the exact center of. All right. So back to this, and then I'm going to try other values. So we have center. Just like content center save. We're going to see what's going to happen now. It's going to keep all the flex items to the center. So it pushes the flex items to the center of the flex container. I'm giving you. So we also have flex end. So I mistakenly pressed Control S actually. I thought I was on my VS Code. All right, so I'm just going to copy this line, comment it, and then take it back to the default, which is flex start. Flex start is the default, and paste, change this to flex end. So you can actually tell the results. By now you should guess what the result of this value will give. So flex end will push the entire flex items to the extreme end of the flex to the end of the flex container. All right, then we also have space between. Let's first save this. Let's comment this out, and then let's take it back to the flex start. Good. So we have space between. So what space between does is that it will take all this extra space. Now, the empty space that we have here is obviously this background, right? Now, what space between does is that it will share the space equally between the flex items equally. So which means you don't even need for the width of the extra space that we have here. As long as you set the value to space between, browser will do the job for you by sharing the space equally between the flex items. Doesn't matter whether we have 100 items here. As long as there is space in the flex container, then the space will be shared equally between the flex items. So if I dump this right here and then set the value to space between, save, and then Great. So you can see we have equal space basically between the flex items. And also note that we actually don't have any space before first flex item, and there is no space after the last item, and that is the job of space around. So we have space between. This is the result of space between. Now let's look at the result of space around. We have space around, right? And we ensure that we have space before the item and after the last flex item. So we see we have first flex item, and right after the last flex item we also have space, so space around, and then in between flex items we have what equal space, and then finally we have space evenly. So evenly means that is the space evenly both before the first flex item, in between the flex item, after the flex items. So justify content space even save. Right. So even space between all the flex items before, in between, and after the flex item. So I think yeah, that's all for justify content. So I'm just going to save it and ensure that everything is back or the default basically. And yeah, we have it. Now let's look at the other property that we have. We have the align items. So align items, we use it to align items along cross axis, and cross axis is the vertical line, right? By default. So as you can see clearly, by default, vertically by default. Let me take it back. So which is this straight line basically. Some of its values. Align items, we have stretch. So stretch is the default value for align items, which is why all the flex items were able to stretch to occupy the exact of the flex container. So which means if I increase the height of this flex container, the dark background is the container, right? Which is also the flex container, or reduce, or the idea is that whatever height the flex container is, right, the flex items will also occupy the exact height. All right, unless if you set a fixed width, a fixed height rather, on a particular item. But if there was no fixed height, right, the flex force to stretch and then occupy the height of the flex container, and that is why you see what's it called, align item. Align item default value be stretch. So we have stretch, we have flex start, we have flex right, and then we also have send. So let's look at it. So I'm just going to say main axis, align items, not contents, align cross axis. All right, align item. Stretch is the default stretch. It's nothing is going to change basically. All the items, they have already stretched to occupy the exact height of the flex container. But to prove that, I'm going to reduce the height and increase it. So this is the container, right? And yeah, this is where we set the height. I'm going to reduce it to 50 port height. So if I reduce this now, the flex item will also readjust to take the height of the appearance. And if I make it 100, it will also what? Stretch to take the exact height of the print basically. So here we have it. So the default value of align items, which is stretch. So just take it back to see, refresh, great. And the next thing I'm going to do is the value, another value which is flex stats. Flex stats. So flex stats for align items. Remember, we have flex stats for justify content as well. The only difference is that justify content works along the main axis, that is the horizontal axis, right? And then align items is along the vertical, which is the cross axis. So if I set the value to flex stat, right, and then save this, so what's going to happen now is that the flex will shrink to take the exact height of the content basically. So save this. You see, so they have now shrink. They are no longer stretching because of default value. So they can't stretch because you have changed the value to flex stats, and then they are now starting at the top. For justify content, it actually moves from the left to the center and then to the what's it called, to the right. And then for align items, we have from the top, then to the center vertically, and then to the bottom. So now if I set this to, if I change the value of align item to center, so I believe by now you should know what's going to happen to this item. So align item to the center, we actually bring them to the center vertically. So push them to the center of the flex corner, and then end, flex end, flex align item, sorry, flex end, we push them to the center of the flex container. So that's that basically for what's it called, align items. Actually, for today, actually for this session, let's look at flex direction. So flex direction is actually what defines the direction of main axis. And so with flex direction, we can actually change the direction of main axis. By default, we mentioned that main axis is along the horizontal line, right? So there are some values whereby if we set on the flex direction, right, it will actually make the main axis along the vertical line. So let's take a look at it shortly. So I'm going to save this, set everything back to the default behavior of the Flexbox, which is this right here. So justify content starting at the left, and then the align items is forcing the items to stretch, and then causing them to take the exact height of the container. So right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to play around with the flex direction property. So we have flex direction. So flex direction. The default value is row, actually. Row. So we all know what a row is, right? A row is actually the horizontal line, horizontal way, basically. So from left to right, or you can call it the axis, basically, right? So right now nothing is going to change, and what I'm going to do right now is if I should uncomment this line, just content. Remember, justify content goes along main axis, and since the value of flex direction is row, right? The main axis still maintains the horizontal line. All right. So if I save this and then head back to the browser, refresh, not changing right now. Now, take notes. If I should comment out this, then change the flex direction to column, column, columns, and then what just happened right now. It has changed. The main axis has now changed. Don't be confused. What just happened right now is that the main axis is no longer following the horizontal axis. As a result of this flex will change. So flex direction columns means that the main axis is now the vertical axis, which means that justify content, which was moving from right, let me take it back, which was moving from left to center to right, or horizontally, will now be moving from top to center vertically, and then to vertically. That's what this implies. If I if I comment this back and then uncomment this, save, head back to the browser, and then refresh. This will push it to the center vertically, justify content because of this value right here, because of this place direction that you have changed to column. So this is very, very important. To understand Flexbox, you need to understand when main axis is changing. And then one thing you should notice is that justify content always follows the main axis, while align items follows the cross axis. And then identify or know when the main axis is changing. So that is when you will know how justify content works and how align items works. At first, it's difficult. Well, I mean, if you stick around and then you play around uh, basic and simple projects, trust me, you are not going to find any problem with it basically. So now since the main axis has changed, it means that cross axis now will now function along the horizontal axis. Now let's look at, or maybe we should just let's talk with these values. So I'll comment this out. Flex end obviously with the bottom right, bottom line is then space between, of course, we spread them vertically again. We share them equally with the flex items, as you can see vertically, and then space around. We ensure that there is space before the first item and after the last one. Okay, evenly it's going to be an even sharing, even equal sharing of the spaces. Great, it's as simple as that. So I'm just going to comment this and back to the top. Great. Now let's now look at align items. So if I see align items that was actually functioning along the vertical line will now walk along the horizontal line. As a result of this direction that you have changed its default value from row to column. Right. So I didn't actually uncomment this because that is the default. Because obviously, see, stretch is already stretching from left to right. Right. So I mean, just it's not going to change anything anyways. It's not changing anything. Then I'm going to comment it back. Then if I flex stats, align items flex stats, all these line items will shrink and then start to the left. Great. Then if I go center, it will push it to center horizontally now. Horizontally because you have changed the flex direction to columns. Flex end, we push it to the straight. God after 10. Great. So that's that.